I'd hoped that Samaritan would be a simple movie that focused primarily on action, but even with such a low bar set in mind, the movie still left me in disappointment. A simple premise about a kid meeting an illustrious superhero 25 years after his supposed death. The two bond whilst a new threat emerges to take over the mantle of the evil nemesis, who was Samaritan's evil twin brother back in the day. I'll spoil a bit of what happens later on because it's a movie that's just not worth your time. Admittedly, Sylvester Stallone was able to deliver some insane action sequences for his age. The man's pushing 80 and caught bullets like they were spitballs. But in the end, one good fight sequence isn't enough to give the movie any praise. The movie begins with a decent flow. The characters all seem fairly likable at the start and establish their traits pretty quickly. The flaws only appear when Act 2 begins and when the supposed bonding between Samaritan and Sam takes place. In reality, it's just a couple of scenes and it really doesn't make any sense why Samaritan allows the kid to follow him around. The kid saves him once and then they just walk around until the plot progresses. And for some reason the kid gets in trouble with the main villain, which was the worst setup of all time. They could have given Sam and the villain more screen time together to brew some kind of chemistry, but they have a single good scene together at the start and then the rest of the plot is rushed from there. The scene seemed to imply that this kid is willing to commit crimes to get by, just like everyone else in the city, yet he is a stan of Samaritan, a superhero. You could say that there's a struggle between his faith in heroes and his very real struggle to make ends meet. He and his mother are dirt poor, but there's no scene that shows that the kid is doing any of this begrudgingly. He earns the money, solves one of his problems, then moves on. Later on he has a scene with the main villain when he learns to be a lookout, which is actually just a way to put him in the right place at the right time. He learns all of the enemy's motives in a single swing, then he runs off. I guess the best way to describe the second act would be that it's rushed, even though it feels as if it's being dragged on. At that point in the movie, a lot of the characters become insufferable, and there's even some weird direction between some of the scenes. The villain even begins to laugh maniacally when he isn't facing anybody, or when he does one simple thing. It's cartoonish at random parts, yet at the same time the movie's trying to be so serious. There's also a scene where the kid somewhat mimics this, but he's a little too into it, and it really weirded me out. There's almost no reason for the kid to be there at all actually. He doesn't have a real arc, which means that the bonding scenes should be the main part of the film, but there are hardly any. These types of character dynamics require a lot more time to brew, and it definitely didn't work in this short runtime. With all the other characters being useless and uninteresting, there's not much going for this movie. And now for the final act. There's no better way to say it, it's mid. There's an attempt to throw a cool plot twist in there, even though it was fairly obvious, but at that point, there isn't a single character who's had a real arc put in place, so it's just Sylvester Stallone throwing hands at randoms. That part is still entertaining, and it's probably worth your time to watch that part of the movie on YouTube or something. It's just a shame that such a simple plot couldn't even stick to the basics and make a Disney-level film with character development on all sides. I'd say the villain of the film worked about half the time, but apparently none of the writers thought that these characters needed some more character development, since every decision in the movie is completely forgettable if you try to look past the surface level of a narrative. The final scene was pretty weak too, but probably because they knew at that point that the movie should just end. There was no saving this one. It could have improved a lot with a few tweaks though. If they slowly made Sam's character fall deeper and deeper into the hands of the bad guy, the tension nearing the end would have been a lot higher. If the main villain's goal actually had some more setup scenes and some personality to it, there would have been more tension in the final act. These things normally go without saying, but when the movie isn't even 2 hours long, you'd think that they'd realize that they're missing some things. All in all, the movie had some cool scenes that you can watch on YouTube. It's not worth your time actually watching it on Amazon. It's just an underwhelming movie. Oh well, that's all.